Unjustifiably a position I'd rather not be in, but the cream will rise to the top. You got lust in your eyes for Elizabeth. History beckons the Macho Man. Ooh, yeah, dig it! God, how did he do that for so many years? I'm John Renton with my review WWE on A&E Biography, WWE Legends on Macho Man Randy Savage. Yes, I know. This is from the first season. It's been a while. I will explain in due course why I'm reviewing it now. I decided to go back and review the first season after reviewing the second season. I was like, why not? Why not give it a shot? And after season 3 ended, and boy, season 3 was certainly up and down, all around, come on defense work. I decided to go back and watch the lone episode that I hadn't been able to review. A&E uploaded this to their Biography YouTube channel, along with a few others, including the Bret Hart one that I rewatched. And I love the Bret Hart one. Boy, even though it skipped over a few things, it still told a pretty good linear story. And this was the ultimate goddamn hit piece. God, Vince still hates Randy Savage. Good grief. I'm not saying... Was Randy Savage the perfect person? Was he an absolute angel? Did he not have his demons? I'm sure he has demons. I'm not saying he didn't. But good goddamn Christ, they were out to just basically say, we'll tell some of his story, we'll tell how intense he was, and the gear, and all that, and the mannerisms, and yeah. But then we'll also talk about the fact that he, was a psychopath in relationships and everything, and stuff like that, and... Not saying he wasn't controlling. I think that stuff with him and Liz, while good, was also toxic. But yeah, let's just get into it. So various talking heads. Jimmy Hart, Sting, Vince, Steamboat, Peter Rosenberg, who I just want to say is a big old fucking idiot. I can't stand the guy. He's so insincere. Ted DiBiase, he was only in there briefly. Jake the Snake Roberts talked a bit, which makes sense given their 1991 feud. Hogan, Lanny Poffo, now the recently departed Lanny Poffo. And this basically, at first, it doesn't tell a terrible story, but it skips over so much of Randy's career, as far as the beginning of his wrestling career, and even like the first number of years that he was in wrestling. It skips right to ICW, ignoring the fact that he worked for the Sheik, he worked for other promotions, especially during the baseball offseason, until he went into wrestling full time. He did start in 1973. Very brief but old footage of Angelo Poffo wrestling, I assume, somewhere in Chicago. I'm not totally sure. And then we get 2014 footage of the mother who did pass away short, I think sometime after the WWE produced documentary in 2014 came out, the DVD set on Randy Savage. It was nice to hear from his mom. And, how Randy was a hyper kid and Larry was bizarre. Or Lanny, rather. Lanny. I assume somebody named Larry's also bizarre. But Lanny, very, 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 very bizarre individual. He made it seem like I was scared of my brother. I didn't want to even approach him for advice. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to anger him. And again, I'm not saying that Randy wasn't intense, but Randy loved his family. Randy basically, and somebody had to remind me of this. In fact, multiple people had to remind me of this. Randy turned down a Hall of Fame induction, in large part because he wanted the entire Poffo family inducted. Because he was, his father and his, brother. But, that unfortunately didn't end up happening. I really wish Randy had been able to make his, speech before he passed away. They talked about Randy's baseball career, how he eventually got cut. He broke all his bats. I'm done with baseball's done with me, then I'm done with it. Randy sort of still talked like that in interviews even after his wrestling career was winding down. He actually learned to throw left-handed after suffering a separated shoulder. And then we go right to ICW footage in 1982. Not even any of the older stuff, but then again, because they were running a shoestring budget, Angelo had money. He was a penny pincher, as the kids might have said, years ago before I was alive. Randy wrestled for a number of years and he worked in the Sheik's territory and he did other stuff, and I wish footage of that existed. I'm not saying that Randy, that they shouldn't have done more than maybe a minute on that, but instead of doing all this stuff about the relationship and the constant hitting that he was controlling, you could have talked about his fucking wrestling career a little bit more. the ICW footage was cool to see, and then you got a guy named Dan Soder who was a super fan and author. He was okay. He wasn't the worst talking head. At least he seemed like he kind of knew what he was talking about. 1979, is when they started ICW, International Championship Wrestling. And Bruce Pritchard talks about the various fiefdoms. Not thiefdoms, not queefdoms. Bruce Pritchard, by the way, piece of shit. Goddamn piece of shit. A liar, a sack of shit. All my homies hate Bruce Pritchard. As one of my friends sent me, a meme once. They basically just said, hey, have this. And yeah, I do hate Bruce Pritchard. Because he always comes across as a disingenuous liar. And he talks about how Brother Love was such a great character. It was annoying, and not in a way where I wanted to see him get beat up. It was just basically parodying various televangelists. But anyway, Jimmy Hart did it better explaining the territory system and talking about Memphis wrestling. Jerry Lawler talked. It was good to hear from Lawler and Jimmy Hart about this. Jimmy Hart, who here or even a couple of years later, like when he was in other ones, he looks exactly the same. I mean, he's 80. I think he's going to be 80 this year. 80, 81. And Jimmy Hart's still fucking incredible, the amount of energy he has. ICW was opposition to Memphis wrestling. And they saw themselves as opposition, and the studio wrestling show was so cheap, they could barely get anybody in there. They would have to have just various talents that, like wrestlers weren't on the show, just kind of dressed, stuff over their face, and, just to have an audience there. And they had shows where they would draw some people, and this stuff it's facts you could get from Cornette's podcast and various other Memphis historians, but you read up on this stuff. ICW was able to last longer than a lot of smaller promotions or opposition promotions because of how they ran, how Angelo had money from being a character, as far as saving his money, pinching his pennies. But unfortunately, sometime in '83, they ended up having to be done. They were done. ICW folded. Lawler feuded with Randy Savage. He was originally supposed to go to Mid-South, but they skipped over the Bill Dundee, Randy Savage Waffle House incident. Was it Waffle House? I'm trying to remember the exact restaurant. But Bill Dundee, who had been feuding with Jared Lawler, had booked in Memphis as well, and they would just trade wins back and forth. They would do a lot of great stuff. Bill Dundee got his head shaved. His wife got his head shaved, or her head shaved, to just do that stuff. It was just insane, the stuff they would do in Memphis. No wonder Memphis lasted for so long. They would do bombastic stuff like that. But Randy could have gone to Mid-South. I think the travel schedule probably would have driven him insane based just what you based solely on looking at the maps of Mid-South. Take a look at maps of Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and even parts of Texas in, say, 79. Let's take a look at 1983 to 85. Take a look at that stuff. That would have driven anybody nuts. Because there were state highways, but there wasn't a whole lot of other highways because there's the swamplands and all that shit and everything, and it's just absolutely nuts. And, speaking of swampland, even the producer decided that he wanted to just chime in briefly about his time with, dealing with swamps. He stepped out on the wet grass earlier today, and he said, this is just like the South. And he's never been to the South. And also, I was thinking I needed to go to sleep because my cat was talking to me. So, Randy came into WWE in 1985. One thing I did like, though, is a praise Pampero Firpo. Who still remembers Pampero Firpo, who booked the screw job? Okay, yeah, sorry. But Firpo, insane, just how he is. Great talent. I'm glad that his memory continues to live on and more footage of his comes out, because he was definitely before my time, but it is cool to see his stuff and see where Randy took the inspiration from. He debuted sometime in June of '85. His style got him over the top rope elbow, jumping over the top to the floor, landing on his feet, but slingshotting the guy on the ropes, hitting the double axe handle in the ring to the outside. When I saw him hit it to the outside, and I know I know he'd been doing that in ICW and in other promotions, for way less money. But just seeing the fact that, he would do that and not blow his knees out. Now, granted, he did do that shit years and years and years later. WCW, namely, when he suffered a really bad knee injury and just kept working on, and then it got worse because with the kind of knee injury he had, I believe a torn ACL, you can't really work on that. Miss Elizabeth came in, and his manager, his wife at the time, she actually briefly was a on-air personality in in ICW. Noted tub of shit, Bubba the Love Sponge, who Awesome Kong is not a fan of, and I just want to say right now is a bigoted piece of shit that absolutely deserves every bit of ridicule that he gets. He's a goddamn stupid shock jock. He's not even a good kind of shock jock. So I'd like to just say I hope he's having the worst goddamn time in his life because, I mean, just read up on the guy. The guy's a pile of shit. Now, Miss Elizabeth, really got over quickly in WWE. Obviously, she was my first crush in wrestling. She was first crush of a lot of people around my age, or I would assume. Her and Sherry, actually, to be perfectly honest. Took me a bit longer with Sherry. But yeah, Liz, I mean, you could not help but be captivated because she looks so innocent, so pure. And then living in Tampa, Hulk it seemed to take all the credit for encouraging people to come down to Tampa and live and everything. And yeah, it's a great place to live, brother. And then I believe Natalia talked about her dad was on the road and that they were in awe of Liz, who wouldn't be in awe of Liz, from children to adult men, and statistically a lot of women who would not be in awe of Liz. So Michael Braun, gear designer, he talked about taking inspiration from Pimpspiration, as it were. I could have workshopped that, but I'm just going to roll with it. He made all this gear. Randy would splurge on gear and stuff like that, but he would always pinch pennies on the road because he learned that from his dad. And Lanny learned that from his dad. Pomp and Circumstance was perfect. He's not the first person to use Pomp and Circumstance. Look it up, kids. Honky Tonk Man chimes in. Makes sense. I mean, even though I think Honky Tonk Man is one of the worst Intercontinental champions ever, him and Randy, as far as their feud, it made sense why he would chime in. Randy prepared, and actually even over-prepared his matches. Steamboat then talks about the legal pads of all the moves, going through that stuff and going through the number of moves. I'm not going to get too far into WrestleMania 3, except to say 93,173 people. Bullshit. It's bullshit. There were a lot of people there. There ain't 93,173 people there. 80? Sure, I could believe that. But they did upstage Andre and Hogan, even though Hogan's like, I don't think they were trying to upstage me and Andre, and then Steamboat's like, that's exactly what we were trying to do. It's a real shame that Steamboat didn't hold the title longer, but he wanted to go see his son be born, and then Butch Reed didn't show, so Honky Tonk Man won it. God damn it, if Steamboat had only been able to hold it, maybe they had given him just a little time off, and he held it just until SummerSlam, and then Honky could have held it for a year, and then Gunther would have the record, and we wouldn't have to worry about Honky Tonk Man having the longest reign as Intercontinental Champion ever, because he doesn't fucking deserve it, because he was never a good worker. And I'm sorry, I've seen his stuff in Memphis, I've seen his stuff in WWE, and his abortion of work in WCW, which was terrible. And he was never my favorite. There are people that like him, and don't get me wrong, he got a lot of anger. And one of the only good things the Ultimate Warrior ever did was beat Honky Tonk Man in 30 seconds. And all the merchandise. Rosenberg is a moron, is what I noted. Hogan was not threatened by anybody. I call horseshit. There was no jealousy over anything like that. Hogan said, yeah, there was. Here's the thing, like, I would believe that with Hogan if Randy was able to have his own reign and not have Hogan basically keep him in his shadow, which he did. I don't care about how his storyline played out. Hogan had to be in the spotlight and had to take Randy's spotlight because Hogan couldn't stand not being in the spotlight. And don't tell me that Hogan wasn't doing that shit, because he obviously was. Now, you got lust in your eyes for Elizabeth. They skipped over a lot of shit. They went right back into how Randy was controlling about Liz. That Liz helped him a lot on television. Her being involved helped. Now, I'm not saying that Randy's incredible work and everything else about his persona wouldn't have worked, but when you look at the totality of the work from the time that Randy came into WWE, immediately Liz coming in, just a few months after, working with Hogan for the WWE Championship in late 85, beating Tito Santana for the Intercontinental Championship February 86, losing it to Ricky Steamboat at in the following March at Mania 3, working even with Bruno Sammartino in February or very early March of 1987, which was really cool to see, by the way. It's when Bruno was pretty much, I don't think Bruno wrestled much past that part of 87. And she struggled with self-confidence, according to Eric Bischoff's wife. She had bulimia, eating disorders. I mean, it's true. It does hold true. You can't really tell what somebody's going through by just simply looking at him on TV. It's a shame she felt that way because, beautiful woman, absolutely just captivating as hell. And Jake talks about how he was able to, when he did the part where he slapped Elizabeth, he's like, nah, I'm not sure how they got that okayed with Randy. Honky Tonk Man was talking about shoving down Liz when Liz is getting more involved. Jake said he got more heat from the fans for slapping Liz. His car got destroyed just by the fans, which I believe. I do believe that people would be that legit pissed off because even though WWE is pretty goddamn cartoonish, when they did something, they were diehard fans, and it's like, you don't hit a woman, and Jake even said it. And you don't hit a woman, and if you do hit a woman, especially in any context when you're in a relationship with them, and you take advantage of your partner in any way, shape, or form, and you try to be physically overbearing on them, no. That's pretty fucking goddamn shitty. Sherry steps in for Savage. They gloss over that really quickly. I mean, they skipped over a ton of shit. They go right to Mania 7. I am not crying. Shut up. I'm moving on before I start crying. And the travel got everybody down, drugs and all that and everything. The marriage dissolves. They get married to SummerSlam 91, but their marriage is totally dissolving. In hindsight, it's actually really eerie how I think by the summer of the following year, they're divorced. They skip over Mania 4 when he wins the world title. They skip over Mania 5 when he loses the title to Hogan. They skip over Mania 6, the mixed tag match, which, okay, maybe in retrospect, I could understand why they skipped over that. Mania 8, when he faced off against Ric Flair. They skipped over that. Randy was a great world champion. Oh, no, let's just do that. We got to just focus more on how he was so controlling. Again, I'm not saying he was the best in relationships. It takes two to tango, though. It does take two to tango. Randy was a little too controlling of Liz and shouldn't have been that controlling of Liz. I get why he was so a little overbearing looking at Liz. But goddamn, Randy should have had the confidence. He blamed Hogan and Linda for the whole thing. Hogan just comes across as very disingenuous here. Again, I get why Randy was upset by the whole thing and upset by Liz leaving him. Blame on both sides. Should Liz have told him? Sure, maybe she tried to tell him a bunch of times. Maybe Randy didn't want to take the news. I don't know. I wasn't there. And then they talk about Randy being on commentary in April 91. He was dropping some weight because he was trying to maybe give Liz a family. Start a family with Liz. As their marriage was dissolving. Thank God that didn't end up happening. His commentary work did not work at all. Now, he was on commentary for a while for this reason. Because he had retired at Mania 7. But then, by the time Ultimate Warrior got fired at SummerSlam 91, and the whole thing getting Liz pregnant didn't work out, marriage was dissolving, he's back in the ring by Tuesday in Texas 91. He's a champion again. I love the fact that they did mention that Randy's commentary wasn't all that great, and it wasn't. I love Randy. I love Randy to death. Commentary was not his thing. He was cool calling a match here and there, not a whole show. They just skip over. They did just gloss over the fact that Randy wanted to retire for a bit. And then they show December 3rd, 1994. He's on WCW Saturday Night, and it caught WWE off guard. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe the date was November 7th, 1994. where Vince announced on Raw that Randy Savage had not come to an agreement on a new contract. And his contract had expired at the end of October of that year, so just a week prior. And then he's caught off guard by Randy going to WCW. It was a month later. I mean, yes, they taped a whole bunch of shit in WCW. Yeah, they did. They taped a whole bunch of Saturday night stuff. And I get it. But his contract is up. He wanted to still wrestle. Vince knew that. Vince wouldn't let him wrestle. Having a youth movement. He took Slim Jim with him. That's why Vince was upset, because he lost $750,000 a year. And that's basically what paid for Randy's deal for the first couple of years, I believe, is what Bischoff said. $750,000 a year. I mean, and he probably, I mean, I'm sure he made quite a mint on merchandising. So really, he was more beneficial to WCW than Hogan was. You know, Nash was talking about how they didn't really have a lot of stars. And then we saw August 28, 2000 footage of Randy basically at the tail end of his wrestling career. He did great stuff in WCW. No mention of the feud with DDP. No mention of his world title run. No mention of the alliance to end Hulkamania. Probably good on that last part. But Randy and Hulk always had a contentious relationship. Yeah, because Hogan always held him goddamn down. And don't tell me he didn't. The evidence is there on television. Hogan's a disingenuous prick. Steroid usage, not the only one, so I'm not going to discount him for that. If I didn't discount Warrior for doing steroids, even though I hate Ultimate Warrior with a fiery passion, why would I discount Randy for it? He didn't like Hogan. Can you blame him? End quote is what I wrote down. Liz in WCW. Randy pushed for it. I don't remember the exact figures, but I believe it was leaked out at some point. It was around $250,000 to $300,000 a year. So Liz basically, she came over in 95, 96. Somewhere around that. She got like 5 years of paychecks. And looked incredible when she started dressing in that black leather. Good God, yes. Anyway, enough of that. So she ends up with Lex. And they kind of bounce back and forth on this stuff. Randy didn't have any ill will towards her. It was what it was. He met Gorgeous George while she was working at a strip club. Whatever, you gotta earn money. And she's an on-screen character briefly, makes money. They're doing Ecstasy. Team Madness, where Molly Holly, a.k.a. Nora Greenwald, got her start. Really quick, brief mentions of this. I mean, he did suffer those knee injuries, and he just ballooned up like crazy. I mean, it was obvious he was juicing at this point. He wasn't the only one. I'm just saying it was uncomfortable to see. And then Gorgeous George's son talks a little bit. Remembers Randy fondly. And that she would go to the Poffo house and that Angela would, give him the shots. Gorgeous George, whatever her actual name is, I don't give a shit, because she comes across, quite frankly, as somebody that really wasn't the best person. I mean, am I saying that she's wrong on that? No, but then she says, "Oh, hey, we're bombed out on Ecstasy on I think it was October 25th, 1999 episode of Nitro." That's where Randy was dressed like a freaking disco ball pimp, and she was in more clothing than usually she was. I mean, like sans 1 or 2 dresses on Nitro, and she talks about how there's cameras set up all over her house. I don't know if Randy did or didn't do that. I would be very surprised. I mean, why? Why keep an eye on her? Is it possible that the relationship was just toxic because of older man, younger woman? Same if it was an older woman, younger man. Probably. But I don't know, didn't really necessarily buy into a lot of her shit. They just kept kind of doing the hippie boom, boom, boom. They just kept kind of doing the hippie stuff. And then Liz on Nitro in 2000 and all this stuff going on, where she's she's in a cage being carried over to the ring, and Luger is feuding with Ming. And nobody cared about any of this stuff because it wasn't any good, because WCW in 2000 was not very good. I know. I rewatched it from the reboot episode to the end. It was not good. More on Randy and Hulk. Bubba the Love Sponge, that's goddamn shitbag who I hope rots from the inside out. I just gotta say that. Randy's rap career wasn't good. It wasn't. Liz's death, and she made choices to do the drugs and drink and stuff like that. She did. She was an adult. Lex on that 911 call is very damning. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I hate to say it, your partying lifestyle kind of bled over into your extramarital affair on on a property that you owned that was pretty close to where you lived. Randy did a few roles, including Spider-Man, 3 Minutes of Playtime, and married his high school sweetheart, former high school sweetheart. They were married for about a year. He had taken his mother to get her health checked out. He didn't have a heart test done, and he should have. And then he ends up crashing his Jeep because he has a heart attack, instantly dies, basically doing that, just because they gave out. And then what's his career? What's his legacy? One of the all-time greats, in my personal opinion. I would put him on my Mount Rushmore. It would be Savage, Brett. It'd be Savage, Brett, Flair. You'd almost have to put Hogan on there. But Savage and Brett and Flair for sure. Fourth could always be up in the air. Fourth, I could put Jushin Thunder Liger on there if I'm being perfectly honest, to be as far as people that were influential to me. But yeah, nevertheless, sorry, I tried to get a fruit fly that's in here because it's a fruit fly. So anyway, I don't know what I'm on about here. This ending's getting really weird. This was fun to revisit, except for the fact that I'm not saying that Randy was perfect. I am, however, saying that WWE seemed really bound and determined to put a hit out on him and do a hit piece here and make it seem like, oh yeah, he was this big guy, but Vince was like, I still hate him, damn it. Ha ha ha. Nevertheless, one of the all-time greats. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.